Hi, this is episode 25 of Highlighting the Best of Youth Sports, brought to you by Numbers Don't Lie Productions. In this interview, we had Coach Jason Negro, head football coach at St. John Bosco High School. Max Preps named Coach Negro their top football coach of the last decade in the country. During that time, Coach Negro and his football program has amassed a record of 116 wins and only 20 losses, 3 California state titles, and 2 national championships. The numbers don't lie, and Coach tells us how his coaching foundation was built at the youth level. Before we get into this episode, please subscribe and help us reach more people by leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform of choice. And remember, if you'd like to learn more about the services offered by Numbers Don't Lie and how to highlight your athlete's special skills, be sure to visit numbersdon'tlie.biz. Now let's get into this episode. Welcome to Highlighting the Best of Youth Sports, where we bring you insights from top athletes, their sports journey, and those positively impacting the youth sports community. If you're ready like we are, let's go. Welcome, everyone. Today we have the distinct honor to talk with one of, if not the top high school football coach in the nation. Coach Jason Negro has been the head football coach at St. John Bosco High School for the past decade and finished off 2019 with the program's second national title. Coach, welcome to Highlighting the Youth Sports. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on this, and I really appreciate the opportunity anytime to talk about sports and youth sports in particular. So let's get this going.
Coach, for those in our audience who may not be familiar with you or Bosco football, can you take just a few brief moments to tell us a little bit about yourself and your program?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the city of Bellflower, and just like most every kid, 7, 8 year old, I started playing youth baseball and then played youth football. By the time I became 10 years old or so, my dad finally let me have an opportunity to play, and I played all the way through my youth. And then once I got through the youth leagues and got into high school, I chose to go to St. John Bosco High School, which is an all-boys Catholic high school in Bellflower, California, in the city I live in. So I had 4 years there and really enjoyed my time as being a student, and being a part of athletics is always something that I wanted to do. Went away to college for a few years and then came back in 1998 as a teacher coach at Bosco, spent 3 years there. Went to Orange County, spent 9 years in Orange County as a teacher coach, and then came back to Bosco, like you said, 10 years ago, and just have had an amazing experience. And being able to coach this program over the last 10 years has certainly been a pleasure for me.
Coach, your resume at Bosco is incredible, and I'm going to get into the numbers a little bit later with some later questions, but you built another powerhouse football program several decades ago in Bellflower. Can you tell us how your coaching career began at Bellflower Youth Football?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. So I was going to college, and I had a buddy of mine that lived in the city of Bellflower as well. My dad used to be the president at Bellflower Youth Football, and he did that for a number of years when I was a player and going through the program. And I had 2 brothers that went through the program as well. So I was always very close. I lived across the street from Bellflower High School, and that's kind of where the league played its home games, and did half of our season was practiced at Bellflower High. So a buddy of mine had a son that was going to be a 7-year-old, and he said one day, "Hey, listen, would you be interested in helping me coach?" And I was just a college kid. I think I was 20 years old at the time. And I went over to he goes, "They don't have a team. You want to be the head coach, and I'll be your assistant, and I'll run everything. You just got to kind of do it." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll try." I went over there, and I was only 20, so I needed to be 21. So I came home kind of bummed out. My dad said, "Well, listen, why don't I go over there and I'll be the head coach, and then you just kind of run it with your other friend?" And I said, "Perfect." And that's how it started. And then and I had so much fun in that first year, and really started to understand what it was like to work with young people and to mentor the youth of our community. And I fell in love with it. So I was going to be a physical therapist. I changed my major in the middle of college and decided to become a teacher. Got my teaching degree, and then again started that youth program. I did it for 5 years. I had it, like you said, a ton of success. We won a bunch of ball games. I think we were like 54-1, and in the 5 years that we were there, and won like 4 out of the 5 years we won titles. It was fun, and it's what's interesting is, and here it is now, some probably, I don't know what, 20-something years later, and I still stay in contact with some of those kids, and One of the kids that I coached, his kid's going to be an incoming freshman at Bosco. So it's kind of cool that I've had that much of a lasting impression on some of those youth kids.
And full disclosure for our audience, I played with Jake and Luke in
Yeah.
youth sports, youth baseball, and youth football. Jake's your younger brother.
Yep.
And on our championship team in Bellflower youth football, you weren't even a coach yet. You were on the sidelines. We got you a pass, or the coaches got you a pass, and you, I think, were the photographer out there prior to that. So.
I had to find a way to get on the field. So, just trying to be involved. I mean, it was just something that I always really cherished and always enjoyed. And I think the youth sports arena was a great way to be able to kind of cut my teeth and learn a little bit about having to deal with a smaller environment of athletes. You know, I have some 200 kids in my program now, but back then, you know, we had 20, 25 kids on the team. And I really got to understand what it was like to work, with that type of a group in a smaller environment. And it allowed me to become better and the kind of the coach that I am today.
Coach, if I recall, you mentioned you were 20 years old at the time, so you obviously had no children. Your friend had a kid on the team, but over the years, and it sounds like it may have started year one, but then it progressed. But if I recall, you built a staff with some great, tough, old school coaches that were kind of some mentors to you. Can you touch on that and how that helped you out?
Well, I think that's kind of been a theme that's kind of been with me my entire career. One of the things that I've learned, I don't know where I learned it, but I learned it at a very young age, and that was to try to surround yourself with very talented people. Regardless, I guess I learned that through athletics, because if you're going to be on a team and you wanted to be good, well, you better recruit all the best kids that you can have on your team in order to go compete to the best of your abilities. And I thought the same thing could be done at the coaching staff. So I had the opportunity to, when I got the job at Bellflower Youth and I was a head coach, to go out and hire some guys that, had coached me, had mentored me, had an experience with working with youth kids at the youth level. That was going to give me an advantage. So if I was just able to kind of, infuse my philosophies into what we were trying to do and bring all these other guys along and kind of update them with what we were doing, that the past and the present was going to be pretty successful. And ultimately it was. And I was very fortunate to have all those people that I had with me.
Coach, what do you miss most about coaching at that level?
I miss the innocence of it. Where I'm at now, it's such a high level program. I mean, all our kids are basically trying to get to the next level. They're trying to obtain college scholarships and things like that. At the youth level, there was just so much joy and so much just innocence about it. And I think that's something that at the high school level, especially where I'm at in the competitive nature that our program is a part of, is lost a little bit. Kids playing the game just because it's fun. Kids playing the game because it allows them time to get out there with their buddies and just do something a little bit different than running around the streets or running around at parks and things like that. It's an organized, opportunity for them. But I think if you had to ask me and I had to narrow it down, it would be innocence. The innocence of those little guys and seeing how pure it was, when they were able to, get better at a particular task or win a game at which they didn't think they could win. But, I do miss that about the game.
And for those in our audience, when you started, you didn't go in and take on a championship teamer. You started at the absolute lowest level. It was probably 6 or 7 years old. And then you stayed with those teams and progressed up. But it was the youngest age groups.
Yeah, I started it was Bellflower Junior All-American Football. And, it was part of Orange County Junior All-American Football, the affiliation. And it was the junior clinic level. So basically when I started, Bellflower had kind of an influx. And the reason why I started, at 20 and I kind of got that job with my dad that very first year was because there were so many kids at that level. They had to split the division into two and make two teams. So there was like a 7 and 8 year old team. And then I had a team that was all 7-year-olds. And we kind of, had to take our lumps and played some teams that were a lot more experienced than us. So basically we had a bunch of first year players. But I think there was only one kid on that team that had played before, so for us, it was a very good opportunity for us to start at the bottom and continue to kind of build our way up. And that's what we did. And then that very next year, we stayed in that level junior clinic, but we had a lot of experienced kids. And that was my first year as a head coach and why we were so successful.
Coach, I know you're big at Bosco with tradition and culture. And looking back, is there one thing that you learned or developed during those youth football coaching years that are still with your program today?
Well, absolutely. I think a lot of the same principles that I used at the youth level, I'm still using today. I mean, you're still dealing with kids. You're still having to put a plan together. You have to be organized. You have to practice. You have to get the most out of the talent that you have. You have to be able to properly identify personnel. You have to be able to work with the coaching staff and make sure everybody's on the same page. We did a lot of scouting, at the youth level. And so for us to be able to go out there and look at other teams and see how they were doing that is very similar to what we're doing at the high school level. The difference is the stakes are a little bit higher. I'm probably surrounded, or the competitors that we're playing against are probably a little bit better coaches than they were at the youth level. That was the one thing that I think was an advantage of ours, is I had aspirations of becoming something more than just a youth coach. And a lot of these teams that we played against, and give them credit, they were just dads or family guys out there just kind of, wanting to coach their kid. Well, I was doing it for a career or for an opportunity to obtain a job as a career at the high school level. So I took it a little bit differently. And I think that's, why we were so successful. But those principles that I learned in terms of dealing with parents, having a fundraise, all those things, that we had to do at the youth level, they all apply at the high school level as well. It's just a little bit bigger scheme, and the environment is a little bit bigger, and the capacity for these kids and their performance is a little bit higher. But at the end of the day, sports is sports. Whether you're working with an 8-year-old or whether you're working with an 18-year-old, there's very little difference with working with them, I have found, at least.
Looking back for you as not a coach, but more as a participating in youth sports, and then even as you progressed into the high school level, how did that participation in sports help shape who you are today?
Well, I just think it defines you as a person. And a lot of times they say you're going to build character, and you're going to build, you're going to learn a lot about ethics, morality, and hard work and things like that. But, one of the things I think sports does is it kind of reveals character, not so much builds it, but it reveals it. And it basically, lets you know a little bit about yourself, and it teaches you so many things. I believe sports is just a microcosm of our real lives, and being able to have to deal with some of the difficulties that you have in life, you're ultimately learning that in sports as a very young age. You're dealing with success. I mean, it's not all about, wins and losses, but you can learn as much from a win as you can a loss, in terms of how do you handle winning, or how do you handle losing, or disappointment, or coming to the realization that you may not be the best person at your particular position, and you have to play a specific role within a team. That's no different than the workplace. Here it is, 25, 30 years later, that from when I was a youth and I was playing through some of these games, that I realized, okay, well, I'm not always going to be the best guy. So when I'm fitting into an environment to where I have to be a team player, it's important. Well, that's no different than the way it is now, here at the workplace at my school. I'm just a part of a greater organization, and I think youth sports ultimately helped that. And I learned so much from it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of came back to the profession and chose why I'm doing what I'm doing in education and coaching, so I can have that same impact on young kids and make them realize there is a lot to gain from this.
We hear a lot in sports about trusting the process. What does that phrase mean to you?
You sit in much of our team meetings. Trusting the process and being a part of a process is something that I speak about exclusively in our program. We have phases of the season, and there is a process at which you need to go through each one of these phases to reach your maximum potential, not only as an individual, but also as a team. And this is something that we're really kind of struggling through right now, because part of the process that we have is developing the team chemistry, developing that culture you talked about, or developing those senior leaders. And now we're not able to do that, or at least we're not able to do it in person. So, sometimes your phases are, or your process of which you talked about are disrupted, and you have to find a way to alter or adapt through that process. But process is important, and you have to understand that there are necessary steps you need to take to accomplish a goal. You don't just say, I want to be a national champion, and you go out there in September and show up, and then it happens. You have to go through a systematic approach to get there, and that's what we determine at Bosco as a process that you just spoke about.
Yeah, and I think during this time with this shutdown and the pandemic, it had a huge adverse effect and shown adversity for that process, for everything.
Mhm.
And it's really a learning thing for everyone, whether it's, us as adults, or this is the first, we've never dealt with anything like this, but it's a time to reset. And really at some point we, kind of went through a whole ups and downs of how we were feeling. But at some point it was like, all right, we got to reset and figure it out
Mhm.
and move forward.
Yeah, without question. I mean, we've had things disrupted during the season. Back in 2018, we were getting ready to play Mater Dei in a gigantic game for us. It's a league opponent, and we were, trying to win the league title. And we had rain and lightning was striking all around the stadium, and the games were canceled that night. So we had to get back on the buses, go home, come back the next night and play. So, we've also had to deal with wildfires here in California, where games were pushed back or they were suspended for a week and things like that. But we've never had to deal with something like this where there is no end in sight. And I think that's one of the most difficult things to deal with this particular pandemic is, people want answers from me as the head coach, and they're like, all right, coach, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I have to figure it out because I don't know, how to respond to something that I don't know when there's an end date. And I think that's what has been, super difficult at this time, at least.
Coach, today's athletes, especially young athletes, younger and younger, they're on social media, they're utilizing social media. How can young athletes best utilize social media in their sports journey?
I think the best way that they can do it is kind of social media is a big identifier of who the kid is. And I think that can be a very good thing and a very bad thing. One of the things that these young kids really need to understand is social media never goes away. So even though they might post something or they might have a particular opinion about something that might rub the people the wrong way, they have to be very, very careful because social media is going to identify who these kids are and the type of personalities that they're growing into. And that has to be a very scary proposition and something that we talk even to our high school kids about a lot, that they have to be careful and they have to use social media for the proper purposes. And that's to let people know who you are. They can identify the type of athlete that they are, and they can obviously see through videos or through clips or highlights or things like that of the type of athlete they can become. But they also have to understand that there's another phase to this, and that is the whole the personality thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what are your opinions? What type of person are you? What are your belief systems and the type of teammate that you can possibly be? Are you an I guy, or are you a we guy and going to be somebody that's going to be a proper teammate? And I know for us at Bosco, we constantly talk about how social media is going to have a direct impact on how colleges are recruiting you. So you have to be very careful, especially in this time right now when nobody's doing anything and a kid has a time bomb sitting in their hand and is going to throw out there an opinion about something. It could totally derail their entire collegiate career. So we constantly talk about the positives of social media and the negatives, but at the youth level, it can be very beneficial. And if they use it the right way and they're properly instructed on what they should be and should not be posting.
What role do highlight or skills videos play in the youth sports journey and, more importantly, in the recruitment process for athletes?
That's a great question. One thing that I will say is it allows us as high school coaches to be able to kind of take a look at a kid playing in a game situation, or if he's filming particular drills. But it's a fine line because, I'm not supposed to be actively looking at, youth kids highlight videos and taking a look at their Instagram posts and their Twitter feeds and things like that, because CIF has a rule, which is the California Interscholastic Federation of Sports, that I can't have any undue influence with these young athletes. But I can't actively even like or retweet or add one of these kids' highlights to one of my stories unless he is a student athlete at St. John Bosco High School. So basically, it's hard for us because as a coach, I'd like to look at it, I'd like to evaluate it, I'd like to communicate with the kid, but I have a hard time doing that because I don't want to break any rules in terms of undue influence. So the biggest thing is for us to be able to take a look at it, and then when the student does become one of our players in our program by being a registered student on campus, then we can get into it a little bit more and say, okay, look, here are the areas that you need to improve on.
What are you missing most right now with this pandemic and shutdown of the schools and your sports programs? What are you missing most?
I miss my friends, which are my players. I miss those guys that I have a relationship with each and every day. A lot of people go to work on Monday and they can't wait to clock out on Friday. Well, that's opposite for me. When I get to school on Monday, I look forward to it. I look forward to it because I get to work with about 200 of kids that are my friends or my coaches that I collaborate with on a daily basis in order to try to, make us have the best high school football program that we can in the country. So the thing that I'm missing most, without question, is the relationships that you have with young people. And that's one of the reasons why I got into youth sports and got into high school athletics, is because I like working with the youth athlete, and it means a whole lot to me. So for me, to be able to sit at home and not be able to, actively, give a high five or give a kid a hug or a fist pump or something like that, it's a bummer because, I've developed very close relationships with my players because we do spend so much time with them. And when that's just pulled out from underneath you in an instant, I mean, we were at school on March 12th, and on March 13th, we were told not to come back. You didn't even get to say goodbye.
Right.
So that was a tragic situation for us. Luckily, we have some video and things like that, but it's still not the same.
Yeah, I'm hoping it ends soon so we can get back to some sort of normalcy, and especially, with sports, it's just such a big part of our lives, and with everyone, kids and coaches and just people that are entertained by it. Can't wait to get back to it. Coach, so 54-1 with BYF. Bosco 116-20 over the past decade, 2 national titles at St. John Bosco, and your numbers definitely don't lie. So can you tell us what that phrase "numbers don't lie" means to you?
Well, I mean, I think the results speak for themselves. And when you take a look at those 116 wins, and we actually had 120 wins, there were some games that we had to kind of that we consider wins on our campus because of some situations prior to me even coming to Bosco that affected our season in 2012. But we're really 120 wins and with 16 losses in a 10-year period, and that's pretty remarkable. And the reason why it's remarkable, and as you say, the numbers don't lie, is because if you took a look at the opponents at which we played in those 120 wins, they were some of the best programs across the country, and that's something that we're not afraid to do, is go out and play some really impressive people. But it also tells you a little bit about consistency, and that's something that I've always wanted to have people speak about me or my program in a positive light, is by saying, man, that program's consistently good. When we know we have to play these guys on our schedule year in and year out, they know exactly what they're going to get and how difficult the task is going to have to beating us on the field, is because of the consistent approach that we take. And so if you want to, rack up those many wins and have those numbers continue to increase in the future, you need to be consistent in your approach. And I think that's something that we have done. And again, like you say, numbers don't lie. You just look at them as a whole, and you could say, man, these guys obviously are doing something right, because the results speak for themselves, and that's something that I'm super proud of. And I've given a lot of just amazing experiences to a lot of young men, and that's important to me.
Okay, we're down to our final rapid fire questions. What's the best piece of leadership advice you've received?
Best piece of leadership advice I have received is be authentic, and be real. I think that Jeff Brinkley, who was the longtime head coach at Newport Harbor High School, when I got the job, my first head coaching job at Tribuco Hills, I went and met with Coach Brinkley, and he said, be authentic, be real. Anytime that you have an opportunity to go face-to-face with either a parent or a student athlete, be authentic, be real to them, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to judge you, and you don't want them ever walking away saying that guy's a fake. And so I want to be authentic, and I want to be real.
Who's your favorite athlete and why?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. My favorite athlete?
Stay away from high school. Let's talk about let's talk about a pro athlete who's your favorite and why.
Gosh, sadly, it's probably Kobe Bryant. And I never played basketball, I never coached basketball, but just the approach that man had, to the competition and to the game, and the way that he attacked each and every practice and each and every game, and then ultimately, now that obviously he has passed and you've learned more about him. To learn about the type of parent that he was and how important family was. And I know he had some situations that went on early in his career, legally in Colorado and things like that, but he was able to overcome that. And that's another thing that was super important. So if I had to say an athlete who I would kind of want my students or my players to model themselves behind, it would probably be Kobe Bryant.
Who's your favorite coach and why?
Oh gosh, my favorite coach. I have a lot of them, and people ask me all the time. I love college football. College football by far is the best thing ever. One of the guys that's one of my favorite coaches of all times is the guy that I started coaching youth football with, Lee Williams. And Lee, and his two sons, Corey and Casey. And Lee is just he taught me so much about the game, and he taught me so much about coaching and working with young people. But I have also now been in a position at Bosco where I've got to meet some like remarkable people, and probably right now one of the most influential people in my lives is Dabo Swinney from Clemson. Having an opportunity to have my quarterback, be recruited by Clemson and ultimately commit there, and who now is a student because he was an early enrollee. I've had very close communication with Coach Swinney, and I've learned a lot about how to coach the right way. And he's doing it ultimately at the highest level and making a big impact on people's lives. And he's really kind of, rubbed off on me.
Where can people follow you and find out more about Bosco football and Coach Jason Negro?
Well, I'm not a big social media guy internally. I don't have a Twitter, I don't have a Facebook or an Instagram myself, but Bosco football is on Twitter. You can follow it there. I mean, I don't even know the address at Bosco football, I guess. And
we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, thank you. And then our Twitter account is at Bosco football as well. And so we have a pretty large following across the high school. I think we're nearly 14,000 followers on Instagram, or we're over on Twitter, and over 10,000 on Instagram. So we do have a big following. We are a national brand, and we want to continue to stay there. So if you have the opportunity to push what we're doing at Bosco through our social media channels, please do that. That would be huge.
Absolutely. And I want to challenge you, Bosco football, to catch up to Numbers Don't Lie, because our Instagram following's about 16,000. So I want to challenge you guys. But I also, you mentioned you're not a big social media guy, but I'll encourage everyone, and I'll put the links into the show notes as well, to Bosco football's YouTube channel, because Coach Negro, Coach Negro has been on there, and he is coming out from behind the curtain a little bit during this pandemic and doing some good history on Bosco and showing the campus and stuff. So we'll put that in the show notes too, Coach.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that's been pretty effective for us. I mean, so our school's closed, but, periodically I have to go onto campus because, there's a lot of stuff that I still have to do in preparation for the summer and for the fall. That's not going to stop just because we're in a pandemic. So I just been kind of going around and filming some different things and trying to give people, a little bit of content of what's going on behind the scenes in our program. And I think people are liking it. So you're
Absolutely.
right. We do have a YouTube channel, and I think we have St. John Bosco football Facebook page as well that we put some stuff on. So social media is massive, and it's a way for us to be able to grow our brand and let people know about not only what we're doing as a football program, but as a school as a whole. So I'm very proud of the institution that I work for, and hopefully I'm going to be able to do it for a long period of time moving forward.
All right, Coach, that's a wrap. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for doing this with us and talking to our audience. And, it's fun to look back on your youth sports journey, and that's where our audience is. So thank you again.
No problem. Thanks for having me. And youth sports is the key. You have to be a part of it. It's kind of where you're going to cut your teeth and where you're going to develop the necessary skills in order to be good at the high school level. And if you have aspirations to go on past that, the youth level is where you want to start. And I'm always going to have, kind of a special place in my heart for all those kids that I work with, during my 5 years as a youth coach.
Absolutely. And you see the guy in the visor behind me?
I do.
So he's an incoming freshman for you, Peyton Woodyard.
Woodyard, yeah, baller. He's a player.
Yeah, great family, and so our company has worked with them over the past several years, and worked on some videos with him. And the other one, this is you remember me when I was probably his age. That's my son. He's going to be a freshman at Sunny Hills High School.
Okay.
This next year. So
great. You speak about Peyton, and one of the things that's most impressive about him is his family. And, I think that was the draw to our school. And, we really pride ourselves on family and a brotherhood at Bosco, being so that we're all boys. But this young man he's the complete package. I mean, he's a great, representative of his family. He's amazing, athlete on the field. And he's a registered, incoming registered student for us here at Bosco. And he's even super high academically. So he's a complete package, and he's the kind of kid that we like to model our program after. So hopefully we get a lot of those.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Coach. I really appreciate it. And just want to say thank you and take care.
Hey, thanks, PJ. Love to have me be on your program. And if you need anything down the road, let me know. I'll be here.
Okay, will do. Thanks,
Coach.
Coach.
Thanks, man.
Yep. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Highlighting the Best of Youth Sports. Be sure and subscribe, and please help us reach more people by leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform of choice. If you or someone you know are interested in learning more about Numbers Don't Lie and what we do, what programs and services we offer for athletes, and how to get your athlete involved, be sure to visit numbersdon'tlie.biz. Until our next episode, go out and win the day and never miss your opportunity to be great. Thanks for listening to Highlighting the Best of Youth Sports.